A wealthy sheriff mocked his paralyzed daughter as a joke until a humble rancher saw her true worth. Watch this inspiring story and don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get started. In the wide plains of Texas, where the sun baked the land golden and cattle herds stretched across the horizon, Sheriff Douglas stood as a man both respected and feared. He had money, influence, and control over most of the county. Yet, for all his authority, he carried an arrogance that turned admiration into resentment. That arrogance showed its cruelest side during the county fair, when townsfolk gathered for food, music, and laughter. Among the stalls and rodeo events, the sheriff's voice carried across the crowd, calling attention not with pride, but with mockery. He motioned toward his daughter, Emily, who sat quietly in her wheelchair. Born with strength in her heart, but unable to walk since childhood, she lived under the shadow of her father's pride and shame. Instead of protecting her, Sheriff Douglas often used her as a reminder of his own bitterness. And on this day, with a smirk curling his lips, he looked at young Luke, a hard-working rancher standing nearby, and let loose words that cut deeper than any knife. The sheriff declared, "You want land, boy? I'll give you my daughter instead. She ain't much use to anyone." Gasps swept through the crowd. Mothers pulled their children closer, ashamed of the sheriff's cruelty. Men turned their heads away, unwilling to meet Emily's humiliated gaze. The music of the fiddlers seemed to falter, and the scent of fried pies and roasted corn no longer held cheer. Luke, however, did not look away. He had worked the ranches since he was a boy, and his calloused hands and sun-browned face bore witness to his grit. He understood hardship, and in Emily's eyes he did not see weakness. He saw a quiet fire that even her father refused to acknowledge. The silence stretched, pressing down heavy on the air. Everyone expected Luke to laugh it off, to avoid the embarrassment, or maybe even to challenge the sheriff in anger. But Luke was not a man of empty pride. He stepped forward with calm strength, the dust crunching under his boots, and faced both the sheriff and the crowd. His voice, steady as the earth itself, rang out clearly. "A person's worth isn't measured by their legs, Sheriff. It's measured by their spirit." His words sliced through the cruelty like a blade, lifting Emily's chin and forcing the sheriff to stiffen. Emily's heart skipped. All her life she had endured whispers, stares, and pitying glances. Yet never had anyone spoken to her, about her, with such dignity. She felt her throat tighten, not with shame, but with something else. Hope. In Luke's eyes, there was no trace of pity, no hollow sympathy. Instead, there was recognition, as though he had seen something in her that had been hidden even from herself. Around them, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded in quiet approval, while others dared not show it for fear of the sheriff's temper. Sheriff Douglas's jaw clenched, and for a moment his arrogance faltered. His daughter's eyes sparkled in a way he hadn't noticed in years, and Luke's words struck deeper than he wished to admit. But pride was a heavy burden, and instead of apology, the sheriff barked out a forced laugh, trying to shake off the sting. "Big words for a ranch hand," he muttered, turning away. Yet his hand trembled slightly on the brim of his hat, betraying the unease beneath his hard exterior. The fair went on, but something had shifted that could not be undone. Luke did not linger. He tipped his hat respectfully toward Emily, a gesture meant only for her, and then walked back into the flow of the crowd. But for Emily, that simple act carried more weight than her father's fortune ever had. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as a shadow of her father's pride, but as herself. The words echoed in her mind, "It's measured by their spirit." She repeated them silently, almost like a prayer, and with each breath, she felt her chest lift a little higher, her heart a little stronger. As the sun dipped lower, painting the fairgrounds in shades of crimson and gold, Emily's world felt different. The same fair games and laughing children surrounded her, but the loneliness she had carried like a chain seemed lighter. She glanced at her father, who was busy bragging to his wealthy friends, and wondered if he even noticed the moment that had just passed. Perhaps he did, perhaps he did not, but she knew she would never forget. That single exchange had planted something inside her that could not be erased. A spark had been lit, and sparks, when fed, could become flames. And so, the night closed with fireworks bursting above the Texas sky. While most saw only the colors, Emily felt the echo of Luke's words burning brighter than any explosion. She had been handed humiliation in front of an entire town, but Luke's courage had turned it into something else, an awakening. In the wide plains of Texas, where pride often weighed heavier than truth, one humble rancher had given her the gift her own father never had: belief. And in that belief, Emily's eyes shone with a light that no mockery could ever dim. Days after the county fair, Luke arrived at the sheriff's estate, not with anger or demands, but with quiet determination. He asked if Emily might visit his ranch to see a life different from the one she'd been confined to. Most assumed his request was born of pity, but Luke's eyes told a different story. He saw the intelligence in Emily's gaze, the hunger for purpose that had been caged by her father's arrogance. Reluctantly, the sheriff agreed, thinking the rancher's effort would only prove his daughter's helplessness. But what came next would silence even the loudest critics. When Emily first wheeled onto the dusty grounds of Luke's ranch, the ranch hands paused their work. Some exchanged skeptical glances, assuming she would be a burden. Yet Luke welcomed her with the same respect he had shown at the fair, introducing her not as a guest, but as a partner. At first, Emily hesitated, unsure of how she could help, but Luke handed her the ranch ledgers, thick with numbers and notes, and said, "You understand this better than any of us." Her fingers trembled as she opened the pages, but her mind sparked with clarity. Night after night, Emily pored over the ranch books, analyzing grazing schedules, feed costs, and breeding cycles. While Luke had muscle and grit, Emily brought strategy and foresight. Within days, she identified wasted resources and outdated practices that drained the ranch's profits. She suggested rotating cattle across different pastures to restore grass growth, a technique she had read about in agricultural journals. Luke listened closely, implementing her ideas with trust. For the first time in years, Emily felt not like an observer of life, but an active part of it. Her world expanded beyond her wheelchair. The ranch began to change before everyone's eyes. Calves grew healthier, expenses dropped, and trade deals improved under Emily's careful negotiations. Her voice carried wisdom that stunned the townsfolk who once pitied her. And Luke, who had once struggled to keep his land afloat, now thrived because he had the courage to see her value. The sheriff's cruel joke had sparked the very transformation he had never imagined. Word traveled fast. Neighbors whispered in admiration, merchants respected her sharp mind, and ranch hands followed her guidance with newfound respect. The ranch was no longer just Luke's, it was Emily's too. But Emily was not content to remain behind ledgers and tables. One evening, she turned to Luke with an idea that startled him. "I want to ride again," she said firmly. Luke hesitated, worried for her safety, but Emily's determination was unshakable. Together, they designed a modified saddle, fitted with straps and support, that allowed her to sit securely on horseback. When the day came, the entire ranch gathered to watch. With Luke's steady hands, Emily mounted the horse, her heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. For the first time in years, she felt the earth move beneath her. As the horse trotted slowly across the pasture, cheers erupted from the ranch hands. Emily's face glowed with joy, the wind catching her hair as tears streamed down her cheeks. In that moment, she was no longer bound by the image of weakness her father had cast upon her. She was free, strong, and alive. Luke walked beside her, his pride evident not in words, but in the quiet smile on his face. The ranch hands, who once doubted her, now saw her not as the sheriff's fragile daughter, but as a rider, a rancher, and a leader. The transformation of the ranch soon reached the sheriff's ears. At first, he dismissed the stories as exaggeration, but when he rode out to Luke's land himself, he was met with undeniable proof. The ranch thrived, cattle grazed with health, and his daughter, his own daughter, was at the center of it all, directing with confidence. For the first time, Sheriff Douglas was struck silent. His cruel words at the fair returned to haunt him, yet he could not deny the truth standing before him. The daughter he had mocked had become the heart of the ranch's success. By the end of the season, the county no longer spoke of the sheriff's wealth or arrogance. They spoke of Emily, the woman who turned ridicule into triumph. She was no longer just the paralyzed daughter of a powerful man, but a partner who built prosperity with her mind and spirit. Luke and Emily stood side by side, proof that respect and belief can awaken hidden strength. What began as a cruel joke had transformed into a story of resilience and redemption. And beneath the wide Texas sky, Emily finally knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.